4 continents in the corner, and Great Britain has been made much larger in scale.
It began as an ordinary day at Camilla's private countryside estate, a peaceful property surrounded by gardens, old walls, and quiet memories. A team of workers had arrived to carry out simple maintenance, checking pipes, repairing cracks, and inspecting the old structure for hidden damage. For them, it was just another day of routine work, but deep inside the walls of the house, history had other plans. When one of the workers stepped into the bedroom of Camilla's eldest son, Tom Parker Bowles, he noticed something strange, a faint, uneven line beneath the wallpaper. It looked harmless at first, just the usual mark found in old buildings. Yet when he knocked lightly on the wall, the sound echoed hollowly, not solid like the rest. The air in the room suddenly felt different. The men exchanged uneasy looks, realizing they might have found a hidden space. Within minutes, estate security was called, followed by royal officials. The room that had once been quiet and ordinary was now surrounded by tension and whispers. With careful hands, they removed the plaster and discovered a small, hidden corridor sealed away for decades. Dust filled the air, and a cold draft flowed from the dark opening. Everyone present knew they had uncovered something significant, a secret deliberately hidden from the world. It was not a forgotten passage from history or a misplaced storage room. It was something far more personal, a secret that had been buried deep within the walls of a family whose life had always been watched by the world. The hidden corridor stretched narrow and silent behind the wall. It wasn't grand or decorative like the secret tunnels found in ancient castles. Instead, it was small, cold, and unsettling, more like a space meant to hide something than to walk through. As the workers and officials moved forward with flashlights, the air grew thick with dust. Cobwebs covered the corners and every sound echoed sharply. It felt as though time had stopped inside that space. After a few careful steps, they saw something at the far end, an old wooden chest, dark and heavy, bound with iron bands that had rusted with age. It looked untouched for decades, its surface covered in thick dust, but even through that layer of time, it seemed important. The chest wasn't lying there by accident. It had been placed carefully, perfectly centered in the small alcove. Whoever hid it had wanted it to remain secret forever. The lock on the chest was still strong, though rusty, as if protecting something that must not be seen. When the workers finally pulled it out into the light, everyone grew quiet. It didn't feel like a discovery of treasure. It felt like an intrusion. As they slowly opened the lid, no one knew what to expect. Some thought it might contain royal heirlooms or old jewels. But when the lid creaked open, there were no riches inside, only stacks of old papers tied with faded ribbons. The papers were fragile, the ink faded with age. At first they seemed ordinary, but then someone recognized the handwriting. It was unmistakable. The elegant, emotional handwriting of Princess Diana. The moment those words were recognized, silence fell over the room. These were not public letters, not speeches or official notes written for history. They were private writings, personal journals filled with emotion, written in Diana's own hand. The officials were stunned. Each page carried her thoughts, fears, and feelings, written with honesty and pain. It was as if her voice had been trapped behind that wall, waiting for decades to be heard again. The papers revealed her loneliness inside the royal world, how she often felt unseen despite the glamour, and how her heart carried the weight of being misunderstood. In one section, she wrote about feeling silenced, worried that her real story would one day be erased by those who controlled the royal image. In another, she described her hopes that her sons would grow up to live with kindness and courage, even within the pressures of royalty. Every word felt alive, emotional and painfully real. Those reading them could almost feel her presence in the room, as though she had left her soul behind in those pages. What made it even more shocking was where they were found, hidden in the home of Camilla's son, the woman who had once been at the center of the story that broke Diana's heart. It was more than coincidence. It felt like fate. The discovery had transformed from a mystery of architecture into a revelation of human truth, one that could reopen wounds the royal family had long tried to heal. When news of the hidden chest reached Buckingham Palace, the reaction was immediate and intense. The royal household, known for handling every situation with control and caution, suddenly found itself facing something it couldn't easily contain. These weren't rumors or tabloid gossip. They were Diana's own words, written by her hand, carrying emotions that no one could deny or edit. Meetings were held in secret. Legal advisors were called to determine who actually owned these writings, the royal archives, Diana's sons, or the state. There were heated debates behind closed doors. Should the writings be revealed to the public, honoring Diana's truth, or should they be hidden again to protect the image of the crown? King Charles himself was said to be deeply shaken. The discovery struck him personally, not as a ruler, but as a man confronted with his past. Finding his late wife's private words inside the home of his current wife's son was almost unbearable. It reopened memories he had tried for years to manage and moved the monarchy into dangerous emotional territory. Every decision carried weight. If they released the writings, the world might see a side of Diana the palace had never allowed to surface. But if they hid them again, it would confirm everything Diana had feared, that her voice would once more be buried by those in power. The palace found itself trapped in a storm it could no longer control. For decades, they had managed royal image through polished statements and quiet corrections. But this time, the truth was written in Diana's own words, and it refused to be silenced. When Princes William and Harry learned about their mother's journals, both were overwhelmed. The discovery touched something deep within them: love, grief, and unfinished pain. Reading her private words felt like hearing her voice again, raw and unfiltered, speaking directly to them across time. But as with so many moments in their adult lives, their reactions were very different. William, always cautious and aware of his duty to the crown, felt that the writings should be protected. He feared that if they were released, the media would twist his mother's words, turning her pain into sensational headlines. He wanted to guard her memory from being exploited again. Harry, on the other hand, saw things differently. To him, these journals were proof that his mother had indeed been silenced, just as she had feared. He believed her truth belonged to the world, not locked away behind palace walls. He wanted her voice to be heard without filters, to remind everyone who she really was. The two brothers found themselves on opposite sides of the same heartbreak. Their disagreement wasn't born of anger, but of love expressed in different ways, one through protection, the other through liberation. For both of them, the discovery reignited emotions they had buried for years. It forced them to confront not just their mother's memory, but the role of the monarchy itself in shaping her story. In the end, both William and Harry understood one thing. No matter what the world decided, they could never let their mother's voice disappear again. The rediscovery of Diana's writings became more than a family secret. It was a reminder of the power of truth. For decades, Princess Diana had been remembered as the people's princess, a woman whose kindness and compassion touched millions. But behind the photographs and charity work, there had always been a deeper story, one of pain, strength, and quiet rebellion. These newly uncovered journals revealed that story in her own words. They showed not just the public figure, but the private woman, one who struggled, doubted, and hoped just like anyone else. She wrote about her work with the sick and the poor, not for praise, but out of genuine empathy. She shared her sadness about being misunderstood by those closest to her. And she worried that after her death, people would forget the real her, replacing her truth with a softer version that suited the royal image. Yet decades later, her fears were proven wrong. Her words had survived, buried but not destroyed, hidden but not forgotten. The discovery gave her back her voice, stronger than ever. It was as though time itself had conspired to bring her truth forward, reminding the world that love, honesty, and courage can never truly be silenced, even from beyond the grave. Diana had found a way to speak again, and the world was finally ready to listen. Theo, discovery inside Camilla's son's room did more than shock the royal family. It reminded the world of the enduring power of honesty and emotion. For the monarchy, it was a painful reckoning. For Diana's sons, it was a moment of connection and healing. And for millions around the globe, it was a reminder of why she was loved in the first place. She wasn't perfect, but she was real, and that made her unforgettable. Her rediscovered journals weren't just relics of the past. They were living proof that truth, no matter how long it is hidden, always finds its way to the light. The irony of it all, that her voice was uncovered in the home of the woman who replaced her, only made the story more powerful. When the news of the discovery leaked to the media, the world reacted with a wave of emotion unlike anything seen since Diana's funeral. Headlines exploded across every major newspaper. Diana's secret writings found, read one, while another declared, "The princess speaks again." People everywhere, from London to New York, from Africa to Asia, felt that history was opening a door that had long been sealed. Many had grown up loving Diana, watching her transform from a shy young woman into a global icon. To them, she wasn't just a princess, she was someone who represented compassion in a world that often seemed cold and distant. Now, with her private writings exposed, that love returned stronger than ever. Crowds began to gather outside Kensington Palace, leaving flowers and letters, just like they had decades earlier. Social media lit up with millions of posts as people shared their favorite Diana memories and quoted lines from her old interviews. But along with love came outrage. Many demanded answers. How had her words ended up hidden in Camilla's son's room? Who placed them there and why? Some believed it was a simple coincidence. Others saw it as something darker, a deliberate attempt to erase or control Diana's legacy. The palace released no statement, only saying that the writings were being reviewed privately. But silence only made the mystery grow stronger. The world wasn't ready to let go this time. Diana's story had come alive again, and people wanted the truth, all of it. Inside the palace, the situation was far more chaotic than anyone outside could imagine. Advisors were divided. Some wanted the writings locked away permanently, arguing that their release would only reopen old wounds. Others believed transparency was the only way to restore public trust. The royal communications team struggled to control the narrative, but every hour brought new leaks and rumors. Journalists claimed that the writings contained details about Diana's final months, her feelings toward Camilla, her doubts about her safety, and her deep loneliness. If true, they could change the way history remembered the entire royal family. King Charles was said to be deeply troubled, not by scandal, he had survived those before, but by guilt. He reportedly spent hours alone reading copies of the recovered letters. Sources described him as haunted by her words, especially her notes about forgiveness and regret. For Camilla, the situation was even more painful. The discovery had drawn unwanted attention back to her role in the past. No matter how much time had passed, public sympathy always leaned toward Diana. The queen consort, who had worked hard for years to gain quiet acceptance, now found herself at the center of renewed criticism. Some tabloids even accused her of knowing about the hidden letters, an accusation her friends called absurd. Still, the shadow of the discovery hung heavily over her. Every royal appearance became tense, every smile measured. The old ghosts of the 1990s had returned, and this time, they weren't leaving quietly. As royal officials investigated the hidden chest, one question became impossible to ignore. How did Diana's private writings end up sealed in the home of Camilla's son? The official explanation was uncertain. Some speculated that during the years after Diana's death, many of her belongings had been quietly relocated, sorted, and stored. It was possible that some boxes were misplaced or intentionally redirected to private estates for safekeeping, but others weren't convinced. They believed the letters had been hidden intentionally, perhaps by someone close to Diana who feared their contents might be destroyed. One theory suggested that Diana herself could have arranged it, knowing that one day the truth would surface. She had once said in an interview that the truth always comes out sooner or later. Maybe she had ensured it would. But how they reached Camilla's son's home remained an unsolved puzzle. Some insiders whispered that a former royal aide sympathetic to Diana had moved them there, thinking it was the safest place where no one would look. Others suspected a cover-up, a silent effort to remove her personal writings from public archives and store them out of reach. Investigators reportedly found faint markings on the papers, inventory codes used by palace archivists, suggesting they had been cataloged and later removed. That discovery only deepened the mystery. Whoever hid them did so with careful planning. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. And now that message had resurfaced, shaking the royal world to its core. When historians and